Good morning. Събитието работи език е английски. Това е анонсирано предварително, така че не се очудвайте, че няма машинки за превод. The conferences will be in English, so those you shouldn't be surprised that there are no simultaneous translation devices. We are very pleased to hold this meeting immediately after the EU-Turkey summit in Varna, which was important, I would say, very important part of the Bulgarian presidency of the European Union. Actually, I would share my personal experience that the real membership in the European Union starts after the first presidency. So, from a certain point of view, on the 1st of July this year, we shall have the real start of the Bulgarian membership in the European Union. And I'm very pleased that indeed this important event happened during our presidency. Bulgaria is a country which can have a strategic role in the dialogue between Turkey and the rest of the European Union and Brussels. We're neighbors for decades, for centuries, and we shall be neighbors for centuries ahead. So Bulgaria is and will have, is having and will have really a key role, and this was a good start of this key role. We have today with us His Excellency Ambassador Hasan Ulusoy, who is the Turkish ambassador to Bulgaria. He will be the one who will welcome you in a couple of minutes. He is a diplomat with great experience in multilateral diplomacy, in security, human rights, and he has a PhD in international relations, but as he told me, his most important quality is ambassador to Bulgaria, and we're very proud of this. We have also together with us Mr. Ayhan Zeytinoglu, who is the chairman of the Economic Development Foundation. Sir? Sir, over here. He will be the one to welcome all of you, and he's the co-sponsor of this event, so the ambassador and the chairman will welcome all of you in a minute from now. And in order to facilitate the presentations, I will continue and inform you also that we have on our panelist, on our panel, Ambassador Faruk Kaymakchi, who is permanent delegate of Turkey to the European Union mission in Brussels. And Ambassador Kaymakchi has his third term as diplomat in Brussels, so he's very deep in this business. We have Ambassador Genka Georgieva, the Director for Europe, here in the Bulgarian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I had the pleasure to work personally with her in 2004 when Bulgaria was chairing OSCE. And also she has great experience on the Balkans, and having in mind that the Western Balkans are one of the key priorities of our presidency, I think that she is the right person in the right place. Then we have Associate Professor Chichen Nas, who is Secretary General of the Economic Development Foundation, and what I must underline is that this foundation was established in 1965, so it is, so to say, twin of the negotiation process between Turkey and the European Union, and I very much hope this foundation soon to have not much to do. When people were asking me, the Atlantic Club was founded by my personal organization. At this moment, I'm here on behalf of the Pan-Europa Bulgaria, and the president of this organization, who coincidentally has the same family name as mine, is sending you all her best regards. But she was kind enough to give me the chance to be here with Turkey, your EU meeting, because Turkey has been very close to my heart for decades now, and she just is not as old as I am. My organization was established, the Atlantic Club was established 28 years ago, and people were asking me what I'm going to do after Bulgaria joins NATO. But today I see that we have even more to do after we join NATO. So I'm sure that the Economic Development Foundation will have even more to do after you join the European Union. Having said that, my last but not least on my speakers list is our ambassador Ugnan Zlatin, who is the head of the European Commission representation here in Bulgaria and a good old friend of mine, maybe 30 years now, Ugnan Zlatin. He will be... Time flies. So we have a great speakers list, and I would like with this short introduction to invite Ambassador Hasan Ulusoy, and immediately after him the President of the Economic Development Foundation, Mr. Ayhan Zeytinoglu. Ambassador, you have the floor. Please welcome the Ambassador, and I would like to especially thank to the diplomatic corps, which is so interested here. I see ambassadors from all continents. All continents. So, most welcome, Ambassador Ulusoy. Please welcome our guest.
Thank you, Mr. Passi. Well, thank you very much for this organization. It's quite timely and important, I understand. Well, Excellencies, colleagues, distinguished panelists, friends, guests, ladies and gentlemen. Actually, it's a great pleasure for us as the Turkish Embassy here to welcome you all here today's panel, which is organized, as Minister Passi mentioned, jointly by Economic Development Foundation of Turkey and Pan-Europa of Bulgaria. They are two distinguished think tanks specialized in EU affairs. And as the embassy here in Sofia, we are very happy to work with them on this important topic. Well, the title of the panel might sound pretentious actually, but in fact it reflects the reality, because I was there in Varna during the summit and I saw myself how important and timely it was for a frank dialogue in a constructive manner at the highest level between Turkey and EU, which was needed for a long time actually. And this was done also thanks to our good neighbor, good ally Bulgaria, and its sincere efforts for the realization of this summit. In the past, I was fortunate enough to work in the relevant departments when Bulgaria joined first the Council of Europe and NATO. And so I knew at that time already that how closely we work together to facilitate Bulgaria's entry in these organizations. Therefore, here in Sofia, this time I'm particularly pleased to note, as the Turkish ambassador, the same and the similar attitude from the Bulgarian state towards our full membership in EU. Of course, when it comes to preparations for EU membership, I think there is no doubt that Turkey is the most experienced country. More than half a century. We've been dealing with all kinds of arguments, ideas coming from the EU side, be they the institutions or the countries themselves. You know, our dear ambassador, Mr. Kaymakçı, is also a great rally driver. He came here by car, driving all the way from Strasbourg to here, and they will go on other places. It's a European rally. So I consider Turkish, bid for the membership of EU. It's like a long rally, but at the end we will succeed definitely, as Mr. Kaymakçı will do its great job over there, not only by driving, but also doing the great job in Brussels. So when he finishes this rally, I think we will be able to join the EU, hopefully. But talking about this long period of time, those babies who were born at the time of our bid for joining, the EU, or let's say that time the European project, they are already almost retired, all those babies, after all these years. But I will definitely say, as the Turkish ambassador, that we will never retire from our strategic objective to join the EU as a full member. So this is our strategic goal to achieve. Of course, today, I am the ambassador for bilateral issues, and also we are joined by distinguished panelists who are true experts of EU issues. So I dare not speak longer on EU, but let me, in a nutshell, express my personal opinion on this long journey. For me, Europe is not only a geographical entity, but also a holistic set of shared values and norms of an universal nature. And in both sense, Turkey is part of it, as witnessed throughout history. And what's more, Turkey is the member of all other European organizations except for the EU at the present time. Thus, I believe Turkey not being an EU member will still be a European country. But the EU not having embraced Turkey is unlikely to serve as a true civilizational project and complete the European integration. That's why I always encourage both sides, including my country, that we should keep this project with all the commitments achieved and to do. So hopefully we will do this with the help of good friends, allies and neighbors like Bulgaria. With these thoughts in my mind, I wish you a good, enjoyable panel, and thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Ambassador. Now we are expecting Mr. Zeytinoglu, the President of the Economic Development Foundation.
Thank you, Mr. Passing. Honorable Ambassador Ulusoy, Ambassador Karnakçı, Ambassador Georgieva, Ambassador Zlatev, Honorable Ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen, dear guests. I would like to welcome you all to the panel jointly organized by Pan-European Europe, Bulgaria and Turkey's embassy in Sofia. Today, distinguished speakers will discuss the future of Turkey-EU relations in the aftermath of the Varna meeting that took place on 26 March, and of course, with the substantial role of Bulgaria. On behalf of the Economic Development Foundation, I would like to thank Pan-Europe, Bulgaria and Turkey's ambassador to Sofia, Hasan Ulusoy, for their collaboration in organizing this panel at the time when Turkey-EU relations are going through multiple challenges. Recently, the Commission published country reports presenting its assessment about the latest developments in candidate and potential candidate countries. The 2018 report, published on 17th April, is the 20th country report on Turkey. Although the Commission notes problems in Turkey regarding rule of law, freedom of expression, and related issues, it is a pity that it does not propose to open the related chapters in the accession negotiations, which are especially chapters 23 and 24. Opening chapters could help Turkey regain the momentum for reforms in these problematic areas. The Cyprus question is being used as a political obstacle, blocking opening and closing of chapters in Turkey's accession process. Ladies and gentlemen, Bulgaria's presidency of the Council of the EU, following a period of strain in Turkey and EU ties, has created an opportunity for breathing fresh air into the relations. During its presidency, Bulgaria has pledged to be a mediator for normalizing the relations between Turkey and the EU. It was Bulgaria's initiative that brought together Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan with European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker, European Council President Donald Tusk, and Bulgarian Prime Minister Boyko Borisov on 26 March at the Varna meeting. We evaluate the meeting's outputs as a positive step in order to be normalizing Turkey-EU relations by restoring the trust between the parties. As President Erdogan stated during the Varna meeting, Turkey is determined to the goal of full membership to the EU. In the meeting, President Juncker said, "I myself guarantee that Turkey's EU accession talks will continue." This commitment was quite important. It was time to put these words into action. Despite all the odds, a majority of Turkish people support Turkey's EU membership. According to public opinion survey IKB conducted last November, 78.9% of the respondents supported Turkey's membership to the EU. However, only 30.1% believe that Turkey will become a member in the near future. Whilst spelling out 2025 as a potential accession date for some Western Balkan states, emphasizing Turkey only as a key strategic partner undermines the credibility of the enlargement policy as well as the EU's normative influence. The fact that the EU is preparing to convene a Western Balkans only summit later this month in 17 and 18 May in Sofia without the participation of Turkey feeds into the feeling of exclusion experienced by Turkish people. Turkish people are to elect the country's president in less than 2 months' time. This president will be the first of the new executive presidency system, and it is expected to govern until 2023 and possibly 2028. Following the elections in Turkey, the European Parliament elections are to take place in 2019, with a new commission taking office as of that date. In the meantime, Britain will have left EU membership on 29 March 2019 to be followed by a 21-month transition period. Both Turkey and the EU should proceed carefully in this critical transition period in front of us. We should make the most of the opportunities for stepping up Turkey's integration to the EU. Two issues emerge as critical in accelerating Turkey-EU relations: obtaining visa liberalization and launching negotiations for modernization of the custom union. Among the countries covered by EU's enlargement agenda, Turkey and Kosovo are the only countries whose citizens are subject to the visa barrier. Aside from being a psychological barrier, the visa requirement constitutes a huge burden. The Turkish citizens have paid a total sum of 317 million euros for Schengen visa applications in past 7 years. This sum does not include the many additional expenses of the visa applications process, such as notary fees, translations and transports costs, etc. It is certain that the actual cost of visa application process is much higher, both in terms of expenditure and the time and effort to go into it. Even countries with no immediate membership perspective, such as Ukraine and Georgia, have been granted visa-free travel to the EU. Under such conditions, it is unfair that citizens of a country which has been in custom union with the EU since 1996 and a candidate for membership since 1999 have to go through the burdensome visa procedure. We believe that the realization of Turkish citizens' dream of visa-free Europe can help restore confidence in the EU. Starting formal negotiations for upgrading of the customs union can be an effective way to expand trade and economic relations and foster Turkey's adaptation to the EU norms, regulations, and standards. The modernization is expected to improve the structure of customs union and resolve problems in the functioning, such as Turkey's exclusion from the EU's free trade agreements, quotas applied to Turkish vehicles in road transport by several EU member states, lack of effective consultation with Turkish official and dispute settlement mechanisms between Turkey and the EU. In addition to the resolution of such problems, we also envisage that the customs union relationship will expand to include new sectors such as agriculture, services, and public procurement. According to impact assessment studies conducted by European Commission and Turkey's Ministry of Economy, Turkey and EU are expected to experience an increase in GDP by $15 billion both. Despite the apparent benefits, the formal negotiations for the modernization of customs union have not yet started due to political conditions being implemented by some member states. We hope that this opportunity to deepen the trade and economic relationship between Turkey and EU should not be wasted. Before I conclude my remarks, I would like to note that integration to EU has been a common aim for Turkey since 1960s. It is not only state-level actors but also Turkey's dynamic civil society that can act as the driving force for Turkey's accession to the EU. As the representative of civil society organization and also coming from business sector, I can say that Turkish civil society and the business community are willing to take its part in ensuring Turkey's further alignment to EU norms and values. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. President. Very impressive arguments, and you can also tweet with hashtag EU Turkey, which I see that my colleagues from Pan Europa BG are doing. Pan Europa BG, hashtag EU Turkey. Having said that, I'll be pleased to give the floor first of all to our dear guest from Brussels, who has driven a long way. Ambassador Faruk Kaymakchi, you have the floor, sir. Up to you, wherever you feel more comfortable. Okay.
Good morning, everyone. Dear Minister, Excellencies, Director General Georgieva, colleagues Zlate and Çiğdem Hanım. So for this conference, I came all the way from Brussels. You know, I made Brussels, Strasbourg, and then Germany, Italy, Germany again, and then Austria, Serbia, and now in Bulgaria. So this is a Europa-Orient rally, and actually the rally drivers are driving from Strasbourg this year to Jordan, and through all the countries that I mentioned in Europe, including Turkey. And after Europe, they will go to Israel for a couple of days, and then they will end up in Jordan. And all the cars that we are driving, we will donate them to an NGO in Jordan, and the money will be raised for the Syrian refugees in Jordan. So And also for this year in the rally we have two major events. Both of them are in Turkey. We are celebrating UNESCO 2018 Troya year. So the rally drivers actually will be meeting in Çanakkale on Europe Day on 9 May. So we will have Europe Day celebrations in Çanakkale to see the Trojan horse. And actually, you know, some people used to call Britain, since we talk about Brexit, as the Trojan horse of the US in Europe. So I am not quite sure whether they will be leaving. Mr. Zeytinoğlu, you know, seems to be sure, but I still give 1% chance to keep, you know, Britain in the EU. And then the second major event that we are going to have with these rally drivers, we will have a friendly football match in Istanbul to promote Turkey's hosting of 2014 UEFA Football Championship. So a lot of events. First of all, thank you Pan Europa Bulgaria, thank you IKV for hosting this event, and also a lot of thanks go to Bulgarian presidency. And since the very beginning, Bulgarian presidency has been forthcoming towards Turkey. We have been invited to many ministerial meetings as it used to be in the past. And also at the ambassadorial level, we are being invited to several meetings and discussions. And these are useful because the most important and most successful policy of the EU is the enlargement. You know, when you look at the end, enlargement brings peace, enlargement brings stability, security and welfare. I think this is the most precious thing that we could ever have. Why I say that? Because I happen to work in Libya, Afghanistan and in Iraq. So I think the value of peace, stability is very important. We think that this is granted now thanks to Europe, thanks to EU, but these are very important values. And I think the EU is playing a lot of role in creating these, at least in our continent of Europe. Today I was asked to talk about the Varna Summit in March in March this year. I was at the meeting, and it was a very colorful meeting with 4 presidents, well, 3 presidents and the Prime Minister, but President, I would say also Borisov, because the EU presidency term. It was a very colorful meeting, and we discussed all the Turkey-EU agenda items that I'm going to list in a minute, but also leaders were very frank to each other. And why did this Varna summit happen? I could say that there are at least 3 reasons. First, at the end of 2016, we had decided that Turkey-EU summit should take place regularly. So it was almost a year, you know, from the previous summit, and there was a need for a summit. Second, I would say it's a so-called Western Balkan Summit, which will take place in Sofia within a week, actually, yes. So Turkey is not invited to Western Balkan Summit. And I think EU wanted to have some sort of summit with Turkey. So I think this is also what was, you know, one of the reasons why Turkey-EU summit happened. But third and most important, I think, is the push of the Bulgarian presidency. Prime Minister Borisov, I think, insisted, and there should be summit, and it's important, and dialogue and contact is important, and it happened. And you know, talking about the Western Balkan Summit, of course the EU side says that this is not a summit about enlargement, so don't worry. But we are telling the EU, we are Balkans too. And we are telling the EU side, there is no Western Balkans. Is there anyone in this room who can tell me where is the Eastern Balkans? Northern or Southern Balkans? There is no such a thing. This definition is created by our EU colleagues to separate, the enlargement process of Turkey from the rest of the candidate countries. But what is interesting is that out of these so-called 6, Western Balkan countries, 2 of them are not still candidates. Only, 3 are negotiating candidate countries. 2 are candidate countries, but they cannot negotiate yet. So maybe in June, we might also have Macedonia and Albania on board, but of course it's up to the EU countries and leaders to decide. So we have 7 potential candidate and negotiating candidate countries in the enlargement process. And talking about, again, Western Balkan Summit, of course the EU says it's not about enlargement, it's about connectivity. We are trying to connect the 6 Balkan countries together, but I claim that Turkey is the best connector in the Balkans. I don't think that the Balkans can be connected without the contribution of Turkey. Be it infrastructure, be it historical ties, be it cultural ties, be it knowing each other. We had centuries of living together with the Balkan nations, Balkan states. So I cannot imagine how could this connectivity could happen without Turkey. But anyway, it's good that this summit happens, and Turkey fully supports all of the Balkan states, countries, membership both to EU as well as to NATO. And in the past, some of the Balkan countries were strongly supported, for their membership to NATO, and it will go on, for the other countries as well. Maybe one word on the Balkans and Turkey. Sometimes we are portrayed as a threat to the EU in the Balkans. Turkey is a threat, is portrayed as a threat to the EU in the Balkans. I think this is wrong. Sometimes, Turks can be quite assertive, quite visible, but this is nothing harmful. We have been here historically, we have shared a lot with the Balkan states. Our business people come and do business, and our cultural organization do come, they do business. But what is important is that Turkey is displaying a moderate, secular, let's say, understanding here. So we have no intention of a political, religious agenda, as it was claimed by some circles recently. So I think the EU and Turkey on board, together on the same page as far as the Balkans are concerned. I'm going back to Varna summit now. The 6 topics that we discussed basically were there. We discussed the migration issue. I will just enumerate quickly, but if there are any questions in details, I can focus on, because I don't want to bore you with my speech. But cooperation in terms of migration is important, and actually it's probably the only positive agenda item right now in Turkey-EU relations. It works, it has prevented at least 2 million otherwise illegal immigrants towards the rest of Europe from Turkey, through Turkey. And it has prevented many deaths at sea. It stopped, trafficking of human beings. And we used to have like 7,000 people in 2015 crossing through the agency. Now this number has dropped to less than 70. So it is around 97% success in terms of reducing the number of illegal immigrants. And Turkey kept its promise. We are taking anyone returned from the Greek islands. And EU is also keeping its promise. EU is taking, one-to-one, within the framework of one-to-one deal, every illegal, immigrant that comes from the Greek islands. But EU is a little bit slow and is not up to the expectations of Turkey in two areas. One is financial support to the Syrians in Turkey. I am underlining this, support to the Syrians in Turkey, not to Turkey, not to Turkish government. This money of the EU is being spent for the Syrians in Turkey, not for Turkey. So EU is a bit slow. I know that the European Commission has been spending the fastest money in its history in terms of helping the Syrians, but it is still a bit late and it is slow, I would say, when you compare how much Turkey spent. Turkey spent more than 30 billion euros in the last 5 years. This makes around 65 euros per person. But if you take the EU citizens, you know, what they have spent in the last 2 years for the citizens in Turkey, it is less than 3 years a year. It's not a day, a year. So EU should accelerate the funding and the flow of funding. EU also couldn't keep its promise in terms of voluntary humanitarian admission scheme, because we had this deal to tell the Syrians that don't go illegally because there will be legal way. And this legal way is resettlements from Turkey to the EU countries. But this program has not been materialized almost after 2 years of its initiation. So there we have a problem. And one of the 6 issues that we discussed was again visa liberalization for Turkish citizens into the Schengen zone. And there Turkey has to meet 7 benchmarks. And I think as soon as we meet these 7 benchmarks, we should be supported by all member states as well as the European Parliament. Visa liberalization process right now is more than visa liberalization, because thanks to these thanks to the meeting of the 7 benchmarks, we will also be able to revise our anti-terror legislation, personal data protection, cooperation with Europol, and we will also be able to work in a much better way in terms of counter-terrorism. So this is more than visa liberalization. But of course, as Mr. Zeytinoğlu mentioned, it is a lot of business, tourism, services, and imagine like 10 million Turks who can afford to spend at least 2 weeks in the EU countries, in the Schengen countries, rather than going to Kaş, Antalya, Izmir, Istanbul. So I think this would generate a lot of job and revenue income for many. So, but also visa liberalization is important because we have a lot of prejudices against each other. I think people-to-people dialogue is key for peaceful, Europe, and I think more contact would be useful. Mr. Zeytinoğlu mentioned update of the customs union process, which is unfortunately blocked now politically, and some of the EU countries are taking this process hostage, and so it is not moving right now, but we hope that there will be progress soon. And there is one area where we have difficulty with the EU is counter-terrorism. In the definition of the EU, counter-terrorism should be only about Daesh. It doesn't exist for other, of course I'm exaggerating a little bit, but for the EU, counter-terrorism mostly means Daesh, so fighting against Daesh. But what about PKK, PYD, YPG, and what about FETÖ, Gülenist network that Turkey faced? So there we have a problem. In terms of fighting Daesh, Turkey is the most effective and active country. We put boots on the ground, and we had to fight, physically with the Daesh in Iraq and in Syria. And now we have much more cooperation mostly with EU countries in terms of intelligence sharing, so that potential for foreign terrorist fighter are brought. And there we are in a good situation. But as far as PKK is concerned, by PYD-YPG, EU says that PKK is on the terrorist list, it's fine, but PKK can still function in European capitals. They can raise funds, they can recruit people, and this has to be prevented. They can also make propaganda, even within the corridors of the European Parliament. So this has to be also prevented, and the action should be serious and result-bringing. Of course, Gülenist, some people we call it Fethullah terrorist organization. This is probably the most dangerous terrorist organization that Turkey has done. Because it is so insidious, it is a secret network, it used to be, or it seemed to be a charity organization, then it turned into some sort of criminal network, which went up to organizing a coup, using some of the assets of the military. So the 15th of July was a big trauma in Turkey, and at the same time, we had to deal with these three notorious terrorist organizations, in addition to 4 million refugees coming mostly from Syria, but also from Iraq and Afghanistan, and also from some parts of Asia. So this is why Turkey had to have a state of emergency, which also caused some problems in our relations with the EU. In 2015-16, we had three Turkey-EU summits. So the conclusion of these three summits were that we should have regular dialogue meetings and EU summits. So since then, we had high-level transport, economy, counter-terrorism, and foreign policy dialogues. Because in these areas, Turkey is a strategic partner for the EU, and the EU would like to deepen its cooperation. And so far, I didn't mention the word of accession, but this is the most important part of our relations with the EU. For us, for Turkey, Turkey-EU relations means accession. If there is no clear accession perspective, the relations will not advance. And actually, Turkey-EU relations can be described as anchor credibility dilemma. The problem, EU has not been, real, sincere anchor from the beginning. And of course, if you do not embrace your candidate country firmly, warmly, then the candidate country doesn't seem to be that credible. And we broke this anchor credibility dilemma in '99 in Helsinki summit when Turkey was declared a candidate country, but also in 2004 when we started the accession negotiations. And it was good, it was advancing, and Turkey impressed actually its EU partners, and we have been able to open quickly 13 chapters. And later on, of course, we added 3 more, altogether 16 chapters open now. But unfortunately, Greek Cypriot administration can block 14 chapters out of 35. So the EU should function for Europe's general interest. And I think this unanimity approach, the veto right by member states, is not the way ahead for the EU, because otherwise we will face problems for the Balkan states in the future. So 6 countries will try to block each other. Imagine that if Serbia joins the EU earlier than Kosovo, who can guarantee that Kosovo can become a member of the EU, even if Kosovo meets all the membership criteria? And now we have the bad example of Turkey. In the sense that, its accession process is blocked basically by the Greek Cypriots. I'm not saying that it is entirely the Greek Cypriots, but if you kill the spirit of the accession negotiations, what do you expect? So, accession process is important. Accession process is the only driving force for Turkey to advance towards the EU. Otherwise, we can have all these dialogue meetings, but this cannot replace the accession process of Turkey. And of course, I will not say that the accession process is an easy one. Probably the Turkish accession to the EU will be the most complicated, the most difficult, the most challenging, and the most challenged accession of the past and the future. But when it happens, it will be the most meaningful, most valuable accession to the EU, because Turkey brings a lot. Turkey can contribute a lot. Of course, you always hear these three famous questions about the Turkish accession. Too big, too poor, and too Muslim. And because of that, we cannot take Turkey in. But what we are saying, Turkey's bigness is an asset at NATO, and Turkey's bigness will be an asset if the EU wants to play a global role in the world. Europe is shrinking, the EU is shrinking, despite the fact that our income is increasing. Europe is shrinking in terms of weight in the world, in terms of age in the world. Europe is aging as well. So Turkey can be a great asset for powerful Europe, powerful EU in the world. Too poor? I don't think so anymore. Turkey is growing quite fast. Of course, we have regional disparities, where, of course, the EU side is afraid of Turkey, who might consume almost, 1/10 of EU's common agricultural policy funds or regional policy funds. But this is not a big deal. Turkey is advancing fast, and Turkey is not joining the EU for money, but Turkey is joining the EU for recognition. And also to contribute and to be part of a European weight in the world. And to Muslim, I think there should be no problem of being Muslim. Everyone has their religion, but in Turkey we have a secular state. I think a secular state with a Muslim population within the EU would be remedy to many problems that we are facing today. And also with the Turkey, I think the EU can have much more credibility in the East, in the Muslim world. I am a witness of that when I served in Afghanistan. When we went to Afghanistan as a NATO representation, the Afghans didn't like NATO. They said, this is imperialist, we don't want you. But we told them, look, don't be afraid of us. We are NATO, we did not come to invade your country, but we are here to help you, to assist you, to form a strong army, strong police, and create a better state. And Turkey is a member of NATO, and Turkey, with like 75 million Muslims, so NATO cannot be your enemy. At least Turkey cannot allow this to happen. Then the image has changed. And I can tell you that 2004, 2005, there was no single attack by anyone in Afghanistan against the NATO ISAF troops, because we were showing them the Turkish flag. So this is important. It's just an example what the EU can do with Turkey in it. In the East. So after Varna, the question actually during the Varna, the meeting, people just, shared their expectations from each other. But then I think the EU side came to the conclusion that, look, Turkey will not do anything in the next 1.5 years, because Turkey has elections until 2019. Nothing, no reforms will come from Turkey. But again, Turkey surprised the EU. because now we have early elections, snap elections. So EU cannot sit and wait, for 2019 November. I think EU has to start thinking about Turkey seriously again after June, July of this year. And we hope that we can, make some progress on the 6 areas that I have mentioned. And maybe if I have, Mr. Chairman, maybe 2 to 3 minutes on the shape of the EU. Of course, at the same time, we should also understand that the EU is not in its best position to take, more member states quickly. EU side, is a little bit tired with the recent enlargement process. There is a cost, of course, of enlargement, and also in terms of functionality, 28 members. It's not easy to run the game, and especially after the last 13 member states have joined, mostly from the east of Europe. So they also brought their own culture of business, and now we see that some digestion time is needed to create a better functioning system within the EU. Democratic deficit is there. We always discuss it. And now the Brexit, if it happens. So in my personal view, Brexit is a mistake. I think, of course, I fully respect the democratic choices of
the British embassy here.
Democratic choices of all nations. But I think Brexit is a victim of populism. The Brexit is a victim of miscommunication. And I don't think that the British people really voted for Brexit. They voted because of the fear of migration and insecurity, unemployment, and misinformation. And I was also educated in Britain, and I was taught one big British word. Democracy is just listening to the people, not necessarily following them all the time. Please don't misunderstand me. I don't want to interfere in political areas, but I think until we really inform people properly, we should not be so assertive. Information is important. I think people should know what they're answering. Otherwise, it's a bit complicated. Now we see populism everywhere, and I think the most important, the biggest, I would say the biggest danger that we are having now in Europe is the rise of populism and far right. And this is what is worrying more is that mainstream political parties are following these far right parties instead of challenging them, instead of better informing the people, instead of strengthening democracy. They are following their way. I wish you for tomorrow a happy Europe Day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador. Indeed, Europe Day tomorrow was one of the reasons for Ambassador Russo to pick up, namely the day before, not the day after. And you mentioned many crucial aspects in the Turkey-EU relations. I will reflect on just a couple of them. I will start with your rally, which will end up in Jordan. I'm sure that many countries will support your noble cause, and we have in this room today the representative of UNHCR, whom I believe will be particularly advertising your event. You mentioned also connectivity, and here we can do a number of things in parallel with the negotiations for the European Union, not leaving them to stop us to do other nice things. For example, to abolish the roaming between the European Union and Turkey, and the transfer of mobile data, which is important. As the ambassador, our EU ambassador informed me, we have difficulties to overcome negotiating with the Western Balkans the abolishment of the roaming. And also, you mentioned that you need to tick 7 benchmarks before getting support for visa liberalization. If you permit me, I will give you a tip. Try to negotiate not only this agreement, but guarantees for this agreement, because as you can always quote the case of Bulgaria, we have fulfilled all the criteria to join Schengen, but nevertheless this does not happen, and unfortunately we do not have guarantees against this. So your diplomacy could make use of this tip. And speaking of Brexit, I, of course, am one of those who try to oppose this process. And as far as I see, there are discussions now that the UK can try to sign an association agreement between UK and the European Union, maybe using the example of the Turkey agreement. This could be a tip. But nevertheless, being afraid of migration, I congratulated my good friend, the ambassador of Pakistan, recently, because a person of Pakistani origin is mayor of London, a person of Pakistani origin is Minister of Interior of UK in this moment, and a person of Pakistani origin is buying Wembley in London. So congratulations, Ambassador. Having said that, I would pass the word to Ambassador Yenka Georgieva, the EU Director in Ministry of Foreign Affairs here in Bulgaria. You have the floor, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pasi. I had a statement prepared, including with tips from the General Secretariat of the Council, but Ambassador Kamicha, with whom we had a great discussion in February in Brussels, tempted me to bring you back in time when Bulgaria prepared its priorities for the presidency, how we chose what we chose and what was here presented by Minister Pavlova in all her speeches. And of course we started at the end of 2016, the immediate environment in the EU after the Brexit referendum, but also after the Bratislava summit and the focus on migration and security, and the developments during Malta summit and the Rome summit. The EU in search of its vision for itself, the shape of the European integration project. And Bulgaria wanted to be relevant. We had our own discussions, initial discussions on the future of Europe, some of them prepared with Pan-Europa. I thank you very much, Pan-Europa, for this endeavor, because it is extremely helpful for the decision-making in this field. And when we started consulting first with our two partners and then with the EU 27, each and every EU member state, the only tip that we got from them was, look, the topic is the future of Europe. And we started asking questions. What future of Europe if the youth doesn't see this future for itself, if our youth is searching new ideologies? What future if member states are disintegrating and looking for additional sovereignty guarantees? What future if the EU integration project does not go on integrating the Balkans? And we started talking about the Balkans, and I had to have consultations, additional consultations on the Balkans, including with the UK, including with Germany, France, with each and every member state, so that we know where we are. And we found out that, unfortunately, a presidency, a rotating presidency for 6 months doesn't have a lot of opportunities to do a lot of significant things. We also have the Lisbon reality. Before that, before Lisbon, if you remember, Spain had initiatives for the Mediterranean, and France had initiatives towards Russia. No, with Lisbon you have very specific rules for a rotating presidency. And we said, let's look at the picture and see what we can do really, very, very pragmatically. And in September, Mr. Tusk surprised us with the leadership agenda, saying that the EU should have an informal summit with the Western Balkans. And we said, oh my God, we were talking about the Balkans in general, we were not cutting the Balkans, and our Turkish friends know very much that the Foreign Ministry of Bulgaria has been arguing against divisions for a very long time, since probably 2003. Anyway, we had to live with the reality, and we started searching for balances. And in our arguments, we used the results of our own analysis in the Foreign Ministry. What is the approach of the EU to the Balkans? We found out several paradigms that are in action, including in the academic world. The first one, the security paradigm. Some of the colleagues mentioned the Balkans as a threat to Europe. All bad things come from the Balkans, including from Bulgaria for some people. We had to argue that this is not quite true, and we had to argue that if we adopt such a paradigm, it means isolation. And okay, we can put whatever arguments in favor of such a paradigm, but at the same time the solution will be isolation, containment, which means isolation. This hasn't brought a lot of good things in the Balkans during the past decades. Then we found out, because everyone was arguing, but these societies, they have a lot of deep-root problems, they need to work, for a longer time. And we found out the development paradigm, which is, let's wait for them, for these countries to solve their own problems, and then we will deal with them. This is a very relevant paradigm, and it is very important that we all solve our own problems. Bulgaria knows this from its own experience. But at the same time, we need help. And we need a vision. Why should people pay the difficult price of reforms if they don't have a vision, if they don't know where they're going to? And then the answer from our colleagues was the partnership paradigm. We will help them, we will engage. And we asked the question, what about the enlargement paradigm? The enlargement as an instrument for peace and development and security and stability. What exactly Ambassador Kamak just said. And we were happy to see that all our arguments actually got into the play when the European Commission presented its strategy for the Western Balkans, because this strategy combines the enlargement plus engagement approach, and this is the approach which Bulgaria believes in. What about Turkey? Of course, we needed to make the balance. We needed to find a way not to fragment the enlargement package and not to create additional problems in the Balkans. But in 2016, in December, we ended without Council conclusions on enlargement because of one member state, unfortunately. And we couldn't upgrade, we couldn't work in this field. And we had, as I said, the leadership agenda fixing very firmly a Western Balkan summit. Initially not saying anywhere. we were not sure whether the summit will be in Sofia. If you remember, Mr. Juncker had proposed a summit on the future of Europe in February. The summit did take place, but it was in Brussels. So we started looking for balances, and we started arguing about the need of a separate EU-Turkey summit. And because of the highest political engagement with this endeavor, it succeeded. And as I said, as a rotating presidency, we don't have much opportunities to make huge stuff. We have to stick to the position of the EU 28, and this position on Turkey, unfortunately, finds place only in Council conclusions, and we don't have many Council conclusions. So for us, it was necessary first to restore the trust and to restart the dialogue, and to find a way to work together again in all the areas that were very well defined by Mr. Kamak. That is why the summit, and of course this would restore the trust and bring more confidence between individual member states and Turkey, but also would push EU institutions to look forward. And that is why the Varna summit is so significant, because it delivered on all what we planned to. And I hope that the Western Balkan Summit will deliver as well. And at the end, we can have Council conclusions in June that are all-encompassing, that restore the balance in the enlargement package. My colleagues in Brussels are starting negotiations today on the first initial draft of the chapeau, and Turkey figures there. So let's hope that we can provide a document which is meaningful and which can trace the way ahead without separating countries from the enlargement package. And of course, what else after Varna? I can't say whether there will be a second EU-Turkey summit. This is not up to the Bulgarian presidency to decide. This is up to Mr. Tusk, Mr. Juncker, and probably the next president of the Council to decide. But Bulgaria, and we have to have in mind the elections. The elections interplay, the elections in Turkey interplay in everything, like in usual political reality. We live in the political world, unfortunately. Or fortunately, I don't know. It's the reality. And then, but anyway, we are very ambitious about Council conclusions. That will pave the way for the future. And at the same time, we are very ambitious to continue, to deliver on all the issues that were mentioned here today on the mechanism for refugees. We started the discussions in the Council on the proposal of the Commission for the next 3 billion. And we also, again, following the proposal of the Commission, we started discussions in the working bodies of the Council on IPA, so that we know how to refocus IPA so that it can be more helpful, which means also confirmation of the candidate status of Turkey. It's not an easy discussion, not at all. Not at all. When it comes to money, if you read the latest proposal of the Commission for the next MFF of the European Union, after Brexit, you'll probably see a lot of cuts, a lot of new ideas, but also a lot of cuts. Money is not an easy talk. But anyway, we will carry on and we will try to have results. If not by the end of the Bulgarian presidency, which is our aim, then very early in July, so that we can indeed ensure the continuation of the process. And of course, we need a continuation of the dialogues in transport, energy, economy, counterterrorism. Bulgaria did quite a lot of things in counterterrorism as a president of the Counterterrorism Working Party to the Council, including with regard to the Western Balkans, but also things that were interesting for Turkey as well. And we believe that we can move forward in that area. And as Ambassador Kim just said, I'm quoting him quite a lot today, we did something new. Not only the summit held outside Brussels, we opened existing council formations for Turkey participation. It wasn't easy. We had a lot of questions about that, but we insisted on that. If you want real partnership, and if you want real trust, and if you want to upgrade the agenda and move back to the accession agenda, the easiest way is to get the people know what you're doing. And this is the logic, the same logic vis-à-vis the Western Balkans, the same logic vis-à-vis Turkey. And we open these councils, including on digital economy, social economy, including on science and research, and of course, including on general affairs of the European Union. I had the pleasure to host such a meeting. And we also hosted a special COELA meeting. This is the Working Party on Enlargement in the Council here in Sofia. And we invited the chief negotiators. Again, something which was not done before. To have a frank discussion with EU28 about enlargement. And Turkey, of course, was present. And we hope that this will continue, and we hope that by July we can report a lot of other things. And I also hope that step by step we can re-establish mutual confidence and start working together more effectively in solving all these issues that we face together in our own environment, our common environment. The work is not easy, become easier. And the EU is not easier, going to become easier. We have a migration package to finish. We have an energy package to finish under the Bulgarian presidency, not easy packages. But we believe that our motto, United we stay strong, is not only for the EU, it's for the whole region as well. So, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Thank you very much, Ambassador. Listening to you, it comes to my mind that this is yet another opportunity to remind of the great support which Bulgaria received from Turkey in our negotiations to join NATO. So we have, so to say, duty to reciprocate in Turkey's relationship negotiations with the European Union. We cannot be responsible for the next EU-Turkey summit, but what we can do is to use Bulgaria as a convenient site for a permanent EU-Turkey negotiations headquarters. And I think that with the support of the two governments, the NGO sector will be very happy to support. Now, I would pass the word to the Secretary General of the Economic Development Foundation. This is Associate Professor Cijen Nas. Professor, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I would also like to thank Bulgaria and also our embassy in Sofia for their collaboration and support for the organization of this panel. As my chairman, our president said, we are an organization that is working on Turkey relations. Although our name does not include the word EU, still from the outset our founders connected Turkey's economic development with the goal of accession to the European Union. So it has always been a goal for us. And as a civil society organization, we have done research studies to contribute to Turkey's relations with the European Union. We also have an office in Brussels, and through this office also we have several contacts with EU institutions. And we try to tell them about our point of view, our side of affairs. At the moment, again, as has been already pointed out by prominent speakers, we are not at a very easy time in our EU relations. We are talking about an impasse in our accession process. At the end of 2016, the Council adopted a resolution, or maybe in its conclusions noted that no new chapters would be opened with Turkey. Also, because again linked with the Cyprus issue, even though we can open chapters, we cannot close these chapters because there is a sanction for Turkey with regard to the Cyprus issue. So this has actually stopped progress in the accession negotiations. However, we should also note that technically in the Turkish ministries, there are departments on EU affairs, and actually the process of harmonization is going on at the technical level. But of course, if the negotiation process could be speeded up, then we would have a much maybe faster, much more effective harmonization and adaptation process. Again, Turkish civil society, in the last few years, what we heard from the EU, from EU leaders, has worried us a bit, especially, for example, President Macron has said that several other leaders, the former foreign minister of Germany also noted that Turkey's accession process should be stopped, and rather than an accession process, we should have a strategic partnership with the European Union. However, of course, Turkey has stuck to the accession process. Both our President, Minister of EU Affairs, Minister of Foreign Affairs has noted several times that for Turkey, membership goals remains as a priority, and we will not accept any sort of alternative relationship with the European Union. Also, looking at it from a more rational perspective also, when we look at the depth and also the broad extent of Turkey relations, We are talking about economic relations, trade relations, migration issue, energy relations, and also relations with regard to the harmonization to the EU acquis. It is very difficult, I think, to find any alternative to the accession process. We have heard about alternatives, privileged partnership, strategic partnership, since the start of Turkey's accession negotiations. Even in 2004, 2005, there were again groups, there were parties, leaders in the European Union that supported this perspective. However, since that time, what such a strategic partnership could entail was never specified. So we are talking about cooperation, but this is very broad, very vague term. So this concept of a privileged partnership between Turkey and the European Union could not, until this day, could not be filled. It could not be given meaning to. So I think this also proves our point that accession remains the only viable framework to organize Turkey and EU relations. Again, we all know that, and all the EU leaders and EU institutions also accept that Turkey is a very vital player, vital actor for the European Union, as prominent speakers have also noted in the fight against irregular migration or in security issues, anti-terrorism issues. Turkey is a vital player for European issues, for European security. Of course, in order to keep the cooperation between Turkey and the EU in these several very critical issue areas, there are a few important points that we should watch out for. One is, of course, Turkey's resilience. We have talked about connectivity, so in order to continue this connectivity and in order to continue cooperation between Turkey and the EU, as we have seen in the case of the Syrian refugee crisis, Turkey's resilience is very important. Turkish state's capacity to cooperate with the EU and also interoperability between the Turkish standards and EU standards are very important. Turkey should be willing to cooperate and continue cooperation with the European Union in bringing a solution to Europe's problems. And I think this can only be managed, Turkey's resilience, its continued adaptability to EU norms, EU standards, and its willingness to cooperate with the European Union can only be managed, I think, within a viable accession process. But when I say accession process, I'm also adding the word viable, because if we prolong this process for a longer time without actually carrying out the opening and closing of chapters, if we are only talking about an accession process which is on paper and which is not actually operating in actuality, then we are actually killing the relations between Turkey and the European Union. They are weakening and they are losing their meaning. So we should actually provide some viability, we should breathe some air into these relationships. At the moment, as again has been pointed out, we have several issues which are blocking actually an acceleration of Turkey relations. On the European Union side, we have, of course, the EU is very much involved in its internal issues. We have the Brexit phenomenon, and the EU is trying to also figure out what kind of a union we will have after Britain leaves the European Union, to keep the EU as an integrated entity, as an entity which is able to deliver for its citizens. Of course, we also have the specter of populism in Europe, especially in many West European cities, countries. We know that populist right-wing parties are gaining in power. We have a coalition party, the Freedom Party, at the time governing in Austria, and we also have countries like Hungary and Poland, which are becoming more defined of EU values. So we have important problems in the European Union. On the part of Turkey also we have important challenges. We are maybe still recovering from a coup attempt, and we have security challenges from terrorist organizations. We are also undergoing a regime change in terms of the adoption of an executive presidential regime. So Turkey is also very much involved in these challenges. So at the moment maybe the accession process cannot be also revitalized because of these problems. But of course, this doesn't mean that we should sacrifice the Turkey relationship to these problems. So hence comes these two important issues that have been again pointed out earlier, the visa liberalization issue and the customs union modernization issue. These are two readily available issue areas where Turkey and the EU can continue to work together. So if we look at the visa liberalization issue once more, we had 72 criteria which were proposed by the European Union for Turkey to fulfill in order to liberalize the freedom of movement for Turkish citizens for short-term stays in the Schengen area. In addition to all the burden, the economic cost that my president also noted, of course, it has the psychological importance. I think if you look at the latest figures, only about 1/10 of Turkish people actually have a passport and travel to Europe. So actually, maybe its psychological and symbolic influence is more important than its practical implications. As one Minister of EU Affairs in Turkey noted several years ago, the place where Turks feel least European or most excluded from Europe are the queues when they line up for the visa application process. Maybe at the moment we don't have queues because now we have agencies that are doing that, so we can get an appointment through the internet, but still the burden, the documents which are asked, it's not just an e-visa which you can apply for on the internet or at the airport, but for example, if you're a business person, you have to hand in your commercial accounts, your bank statements, which is something which may be infringing your also privacy. You have to show that for students, for example, you have to show that you have a certain amount of savings in the bank, etc. So it is actually a quite burdensome, exclusionary process. And if we can get rid of the visa barrier, then it will be, of course, bring several benefits for business transactions and also for civil society dialogue. We have to also take into account that in Turkey we have a quite dynamic civil society. We have several civil society organizations. And majority of the population are actually willing to integrate with the European Union. EU is a very important, I think, destination for Turkish citizens. It's a model. Also, for example, there are programs like Erasmus where Turkish students are also benefit from, and there is a huge interest in such programs. So there is a dynamic, vital civil society that is ready to integrate with the European Union, and that is also ready to also integrate with European values, with democratic values. And I think visa liberalization, if it can be managed, will give a very positive message that Turkey is accepted, it is not excluded from the European, let's say, realm, from the European community. The other issue is the customs union modernization issue. At the moment, as you may all know, customs union between Turkey and the European Union cover only industrial goods, trade in industrial goods, which is about 20% of the economy. So the other important sectors such as agriculture and services are not included. So their inclusion into the customs union relationship can also, of course, deepen trade and economic relations between Turkey and the European Union. It may also trigger more investments between the parties. At the moment, the European Union is Turkey's first trading partner, while Turkey is the EU's fourth export and fifth import partner. And if the impact assessment studies also tell us rightly, then we may also expect increase in trade and also welfare and consumer welfare in both Turkey and the European Union. In addition to the problems that we are at the moment experiencing in the customs union relationship, this revising and modernization process will give us a chance to review the working of the customs union and to involve more Turkey's involvement and consultation in the making of EU trade policy. Again, we should also add that Turkish agriculture has many important sectors, especially such as, for example, fresh vegetables and fruit sectors, which may also produce and sell in the European market. And when we liberalize agricultural goods, we have to also take into account that Turkey will be liberalizing its agricultural sector against the European Union without taking part in the common agricultural policy of the European Union. So actually it is also a quite important and quite delicate process. And a lot of preparations, a lot of strategic also preparations have to go into the opening of agricultural and services sectors to liberalization between Turkey and the European Union. And we hope that if we can get rid of the political obstacles in front of the modernization process, then we can have deeper integration and we can keep up Turkey's momentum in aligning with the EU norms and standards, and Turkey then can integrate more into the EU single market. And of course, reciprocally, the EU will have many advantages in the Turkish market, which is again a thriving, very dynamic market. And also, what is more, we do not have the luxury of leaving the customs union as it is, because there is an erosion in the customs union relationship. So we have to take it, we have to make some revisions to it. Otherwise, it may lead to losses on both sides. And the studies tell us that the best option is a deepened customs union, rather than some alternatives such as a free trade agreement between Turkey and the European Union. Let me end my words here, and what I want to emphasize lastly is that, of course, we know that the European Union is implementing political conditionality to candidate countries, and it is perfectly all right, because we also want EU membership because we want to achieve these political standards, the Copenhagen criteria. But just placing political obstacles and implementing inconsistent policies towards Turkey does not have the effect of providing for progress in these standards in Turkey. Because if you can keep up the enlargement process, if you can have a credible membership perspective for Turkey, then it is the best way that the EU can help Turkey achieve these standards which are implied in the Copenhagen criteria. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. And now, after your so informative speech, we move to the heavy artillery of the European Commission in Bulgaria, Ambassador Sofia, who will have the final word.
This is very dangerous. I don't mind to speak from the lectern because some exercise is needed. So long time. Thank you very much to Pan Europa and especially to Ambassador Ulusoy for inviting me to this important event, and thank you for IKV for also joining forces with the Embassy of Turkey and Pan Europa in organizing this really very important event, because I have to say topic like this should be more and more discussed, not only here within the Bulgarian context, but also in the context of the EU. I'm in a way privileged and cursed by the fact that I'm speaking last as a panelist, because most of the things that I wanted to say have already been said. I heard, how to say, claims from both sides, but I'm particularly happy to and thankful to the fact that we heard the concerns of the Turkish side, and we also heard the explanations or the position of the Bulgarian side, which is representing the Council of the European Union. So for me, as representing the European Commission, I think the easy task has remained. I also attended the summit in Varna, and for me it was also a really, how to say, in a kind it was like a history in the making, because it is indeed for quite some time that there have been different attempts to talk to each other, perhaps not with not fulfilling the expectations from both sides, what would be achieved through such talks. But the mere fact that we have the leaders sitting together around one table and talking very open and frankly to each other, I think this is something that deserves our admirations and appreciation. I'm not going to read all my speech that I've prepared about the different stages of EU-Turkey relationship and especially negotiations. I just want to highlight that we appreciate very much the determination that has been already expressed several times, also by the highest political level in Turkey for the European perspective of the Republic of Turkey. I also have to say that as Bulgaria, which is a country that joined the Union only 10.5 years ago, we also went through a process, and during the different stages of this accession process, we have been also asking ourselves questions that we hear today our Turkish friends are asking themselves. We also been through certain frustrations. We also went through a situation where we thought that perhaps we don't receive equal and fair treatment. But one of the lessons, and I believe also Dr. Bossi and Ambassador Georgieva will support me because they were in a way participating in this whole, one of the important lessons that we learned is that there are rules that are set up, and if you want to join this club, you have to follow the rules. And that is it. I mean, nobody is pushing you there by force. It's your own decision, your own drive, your own will. If you want to do it, then you have to follow the rules. And if others are saying that, for example, they are not satisfied with your performance in this area or that area, you have to look into yourself and find ways how to improve. Of course, I'm far from how to say preaching and giving advices. I just wanted to give a couple of quotes from the President of the European Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker, in Varna. And he said that the Varna summit was a summit of mixed feelings, but not of mixed messages. It proved successful in relaunching an open and constructive dialogue with Turkey and re-establishing a climate of trust. I think this is a very important message that we should take. And also that this summit, the commonalities between the EU and Turkey were emphasized. And again, I'll quote President Juncker that we should be talking about the areas of interest and ambitions that unite us, not the ones that divide us. Turkey and Europe have to move together, as only by joining forces we can tackle common challenges. Indeed, the dialogue was pursued in the last year in a number of areas of foreign and security policy, notably on Syria, Libya and Iraq. And the counter-terrorism dialogue was held in November 2017. Turkey and the EU further developed their cooperation in area of energy, transport and economy and trade, supported by high-level dialogues. In December 2016, the Commission adopted a recommendation to open negotiations in view of the extension and modernization of the EU-Turkey Customs Union, which has since been under consideration in the Council, as already mentioned by Ambassador Georgieva. During 2017, the implementation of March 2016 EU-Turkey statement has continued to deliver concrete results in reducing irregular and dangerous crossings and in saving lives in the Aegean Sea. Turkey sustained its outstanding efforts to provide massive and unprecedented humanitarian aid and support to more than 3.5 million refugees from Syria and some 365,000 refugees from other countries. Turkey and the European Union further built on the fruitful cooperation under the Facility for Refugees in Turkey. By the end of December 2017, the full envelope of 3 billion euro has been contracted, with 72 projects and almost 1.2 million of the most vulnerable refugees benefited from the monthly cash transfers. Disbursement reached close to 2 billion to that date. Indeed, this was already mentioned that perhaps the decision-making process and the procedures seem sometimes slow. This is true, by the way, and also the question about vetoing was also mentioned. I have to tell you that in his State of the Union address of President Juncker of last year, this was one of the proposals that he made, and it was mentioned that actually we should perhaps think of ways of using more and more the opportunities and actually the tools that we are given in the Lisbon Treaty, that actually we may move to certain decisions to be taken with qualified majority rather than with a consensus. This will, of course, give us more flexibility and better reaction to extreme situations like we had with the refugee crisis. Let me also remind everybody here in this room that we're actually the European Union and not the Soviet Union when the decisions were taken in quite different way. Now, the European Union continues to have a vital interest to promote reforms in Turkey. The Commission is aware of some of the shortcomings and difficulties, in particular as regards funds managed directly by the Turkish authorities, and the challenges linked to the cooperation on the rule of law and fundamental rights issues. The Commission takes these issues very seriously and has already taken steps to address them, including as a result of its own midterm review of EU assistance to Turkey. First, the 2017 programs have been adjusted downwards to address the low absorption capacity and serious backsliding in the fields of fundamental rights and the rule of law. This was done in line with the overall guidance from EU member states. Second, the Commission has also reoriented its assistance more towards area of higher priority. Already more than one-third of the pre-accession funds IPA for 2014-2020 focus on the priority sectors of democracy and governance, empowerment of civil society, rule of law, and fundamental rights. And finally, the Commission has taken steps to increase the share of funds managed directly by the Commission and taken into account the underperformance of the IPA implementation in the framework of the IPA midterm review, which led to the proposal of budgetary cuts for the period 2018-2020. Yet, progress is obviously not only depending on funding, but more importantly, on the political will of the Turkish authorities. Reduced willingness to engage in reforms and lower administrative capacity mean that there is a reduced scope for engaging in cooperation. The Commission is regularly raising these issues of concern in its political dialogues with Turkey. Within the framework of accession negotiation, 16 chapters have been opened so far, and one of these was provisionally closed. This is the chapter on science and research. Reforms and developments in Turkey continue to be monitored by bodies set up under the association agreement. The Commission, jointly with the European External Action Service, has maintained the EU-Turkey relations in all key areas of joint interest based on a broad strategic engagement. Developing further close economic ties was one of the shared priorities. Turkey is the European Union's 5th largest trading partner, while the European Union is Turkey's largest. 2 out of 5 goods traded by Turkey come from or go to the European Union, and over 70% of foreign direct investment in Turkey originates in the EU. The EU and Turkey also continue to improve their sectorial cooperation, notably in the field of transport, energy, and the customs union. Ladies and gentlemen, as strategic partners in many areas, the European Union and Turkey will continue to talk with each other to improve their relations. In Varna, President Juncker outlined some concrete concerns of the European Commission. He called for the release of the imprisoned Greek soldiers and asked Turkey to reconsider the release of the imprisoned journalists too. He expressed his view that Turkish institutions, thanks to the efforts which have been undertaken, are strong enough for the state of emergency in the country to end. As regards to interventions in Syria, President Juncker asked that human rights, international law, and the rule of law should be respected. On fighting terrorism, he said that only in joining forces, the European Union and Turkey will be able to win the fight against terrorism. Turkey committed to improve respect for the rule of law and its relations with the member states in the European Union. More high-level meetings will follow to maintain the dialogue and advance in the areas of joint interest. I have to underline here that at the Varna summit, I don't think this was mentioned so far here, but there was an agreement between all the leaders that such meetings, such summits should continue and it should be held more regularly. As regards the role of Bulgaria, the government and Prime Minister Borisov in particular have demonstrated on numerous occasions their support for nurturing positive ties with Turkey, both on national level and also between the European Union and Turkey. In expression of this attitude came also the Varna summit in March, for which Prime Minister Borisov advocated strongly and which attracted a lot of international attention. Could Bulgaria use its tenure as the President of the Council of the EU to push forward EU-Turkish relations? Sofia has assumed its role as an advocate of enlargement, chiefly with respect to the Western Balkans, but not wholly ignoring Turkey either. It is important to know that on EU accession talks, President Juncker stated in Varna that Turkey is a candidate country and that no other decision to the contrary has been taken. He said that he would therefore expect that Turkey also acts like a candidate country and improves relations with European Union member states. I just want to, before closing, to add, as we are here in the military house, or how shall we, a military house, a little story, a little personal story, just to illustrate how fast the developments around us, global political developments around us, changed in the recent decades, and how they make it possible to even have such events and dialogues. Some 35 years ago, back in 1983, I was doing my national service on the border with Greece. This is where my base was. I was stationed there. And one day, in those days, in each army detachment, we used to have the so-called political officers. So our political officer came to us and he said, I want to run something like a survey, an opinion poll among all the soldiers to estimate what is the morale of the army. And he said this opinion poll is going to have only one question. And the question was, who are the worst enemies of the mankind? And the next day we gathered together to discuss the outcomes of this survey. And we saw our political officer very downhearted. So we asked him, Comrade Captain, why are you so downhearted? He said, oh, I'm so disappointed, the morale of the army is so low, how are we going to defend, to protect our socialist country? This is unbelievable. And we said, okay, why? What's the problem? Well, look at the answers. And so we looked at the answers and we saw that for most of our fellow soldiers in that detachment, we took this opinion poll as a joke. So the question, who are the worst enemies of the mankind? Some people replied, air pollution, the women, you name it. And he said, this was not the answer I was expecting. So we said, okay, what is the correct answer? Apparently, in the mind of the political officer at the time, the correct answer to the question, who are the worst enemies of the mankind, were the Turks and the Greeks. And this should only illustrate the thinking at that time and the way we have been taught. So now, for only 35 years, which in historical terms is just nothing, you see how things have been changed, and now you see that Turkey and Greece are one of the closest allies of Bulgaria, my country, but also partners to the European Union in fighting all the global challenges that are facing us. So, again, final sentence to close. I would like to close by underlining that the need for sustainable EU-Turkey relations obliges both sides to take steps to honor their commitment to integration. Dialogue is the starting point, but also political will and concrete measures and reforms will be needed to further improve the relations between the European Union and Turkey. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ambassador. I was listening to you, I was wondering what would be the correct answer today on this great question. And I'm afraid that depending on where you raise the question, you will have different standards for what is correct or not. Now we have one very good news, extremely good news for a moderator, that we are on time. We have time to continue our discussion. We have the first one who was ready to open the discussion is actually the predecessor of Ambassador Genka Georgieva. This is Ambassador Biserka Benisheva, who was director of this important directorate of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs when we concluded the negotiations with the European Union. Actually, she started even the negotiations with the World Trade Organization before this, so she's a professional negotiator. And after that, she was our ambassador to Ireland in 2004, when we de facto ended up with, during the Irish presidency of the European Union, we ended up with this negotiation process. Ambassador, I think the floor, you can speak from here. In Bulgaria, we have tradition that women are conducting the negotiations with the European Union. That's why we're successful.
Thank you, Minister. Yes, you are absolutely correct. Thank you, Minister. You are absolutely correct. Sophisticated jobs are given to women. Yes. I just want to congratulate all the panelists for their instructive and comprehensive presentations of relationship between Turkey and the European Union. Preparing for today's conference, Minister Pasi and myself, we were looking at the history of this relationship, and we noticed that there are coincidences of parallel dates. 2005, Bulgaria signed the accession treaty, and Turkey opened accession negotiations. The start of the accession negotiations opened a new chapter for Turkey in its relations with the Union. And since that time, as the panelists noted, there were ups and downs in bilateral relations, particularly with regard to the accession negotiations. But Turkey remains a candidate and a key partner of the European Union, with whom both sides share joint interest in a number of areas, and also discussing at such high-level meetings as the one in Varna, common challenges. The areas were mentioned by the ambassador, and of course we have to admit that we have good cooperation and producing results such as the cooperation on migration. There are also issues on which both sides disagree, and issues on which both sides have different interpretation. And these areas were mentioned. Judging from our own experience in relationship with the Union, we also had sometimes our frustration. We also went through a visa liberalization process before accession, and that was quite an experience for us. I looked at the latest report, the country report that the Commission prepared on all the candidates, and noticed that the Commission underlines the importance of its proposal to extend and modernize the EU-Turkey Customs Union agreement, which the Commission considers as mutually beneficial. So I would like to raise a question to the ambassador. Do you think that the upgrade of the Customs Union is a building block towards membership, or it could be considered as an alternative to membership. And second question, regrettably, the United Kingdom decided to leave the customs union and the internal market. And there will be a new arrangement. So probably that new arrangement will be a new generation of agreements between the EU and the UK and third partners. Do you think that future relations or the upgrade of relations between Turkey and the EU until accession could be based on such new generation of agreements? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you for your intervention. And now we are ready to move to the discussion. I encourage each and all of you to raise questions or make very short statements. I would start with raising two questions with our distinguished panelists. First one, what would you like to see changed in Turkey vis-à-vis the EU membership negotiations? And number two, the reciprocal question, what would you like to see changed in the European Union vis-à-vis the negotiations with Turkey? And I will tell you immediately that actually the ambassador mentioned that we signed the accession treaty, our European agreement, on 25th of April 2005. And I was at that time with this necktie. This is the necktie of the Luxembourg presidency of the European Union. Just a second, is it Luxembourg? Luxembourg, yeah. This is the correct tie, which I put on the in sign of respect to your negotiations, hoping one day to have a necktie from the day when you signed this negotiation.
You'll have better neckties.
And I wanted at that time one significant change in the European Union. This was the rule of consensus, or said the other way around, the rule of veto, because the consensus is equivalent to the veto. And I was very happy to see that in the Lisbon Treaty, indeed, the veto procedure or the consensus procedure was significantly alleviated for a number of cases in the European Union, and I very much hope that this will continue. So these are my two questions to the panelists, but I see here the ambassador of Pakistan and would like the microphone to go to him.
Thank you, Dr. Vasi. Thank you very much for the excellent presentation, also at both sides and the points of views. I was here just to listen to it, but since you mentioned Pakistan, I thought to add to it first that yes, these people who have been elected in the UK are the UK nationals of Pakistani origin, and that means in difficult times people turn to Pakistan, and we are always willing to help. My question remains to Ambassador Farouk. 53 years of negotiations. I see Bulgaria faced difficulties also, but for 7 years